800. Again, that number is 352-629-5800.
Ocala's information station, 1370 WOCA.
Ocala.
All right, 7 minutes after 11 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. You know, when I first started doing talk radio, which was, I guess we're going on 20 years now, right? 12 years at this one and probably 7 or 8 at the other one.
Yes.
When I first started doing it, I had no clue what I was really getting into. And what I have learned from our listeners, I have a teacher-student relationship in my life. Mm-hmm. I'm always the student. There's always something I can learn. And when I first started doing this, and we were talking about things that were important to us as Americans, the Founding Fathers, those 3 words, the Founding Fathers, came up a lot. Mm-hmm. The one name that came up frequently was James Madison. And to be honest, 20 years ago or so, that was a name from social studies class that I thought, well, we didn't learn a whole lot about that guy, I don't think. I remember Washington. I remember Jefferson.
Yeah.
And I remember Lincoln. You know, of course, I don't know if Lincoln is not normally thrown into that group. But mm-hmm. but anyway, one of the things that becomes really clear is that the Americans who are really astute at understanding what the Founding Fathers envisioned are the ones who keep that dream alive.
Yes.
It is that group of people, and it's a small group, but it's a powerful group. And the more we know about what that dream was supposed to be about and why that dream came to be, the more we will stand up and defend this wonderful concept called the United States of America. So when I had a call from a publicist talking to me about this book called James Madison, I was embarrassed when I found out that Lynne Cheney was the Lynne Cheney.
Yes.
Because I didn't know. So I'm a little bit starstruck right now because she's on the phone.
I even dressed up for her today.
Did you really?
I did. I
thought that was for me.
I mean, no.
It's on the phone.
I dressed up for her. I couldn't help it.
She's on the phone. Lynne Cheney is on the phone, and she has written this awesome book on James Madison, and I will not lie to her because I'm like George Washington. The book just arrived, 2 days ago, 2 or 3 days ago?
Yeah.
Or whatever it was.
Been through it.
I haven't been much through it. I'll tell you this. I didn't realize how pretty Dolly Madison was. Although I like her cakes.
Yeah.
Right? All right, let's go to the phone and say hi to Lynne Cheney. Boy, this is an honor. Mrs. Cheney. Good morning, Mrs. Cheney. I guess I should address you that way. Good morning, Lynne.
Good morning.
How are you?
Pleasure to be with you.
How do I address you?
Very well, thanks.
What's the best way? Tell me, I don't want to be disrespectful.
Lynn, Mrs. Cheney, either one is fine.
Okay, all right. You're a very beautiful lady, too.
I'm actually in Wyoming, and everybody in Wyoming calls me Lynn. So there you go.
Okay, so I'll feel comfortable with that then. Well, you can call me Larry. This is one of those guys that I always knew was super important to us, but honestly didn't know much. And as I read through the book and look through the book, I just didn't realize how much he has contributed to us. So thank you for doing this. When did this happen? Have you always been like the good historian and the good social studies student?
You know, I got my PhD in English, and it was in the 19th century, though. I don't mean I got it in the 19th century. I got it in 19th century literature.
Oh, okay. Okay.
You know, I think I should have been a history major because it's just my love. I just love reading history. It's I also read a lot of detective fiction, you know, so I sometimes think reading history is a little bit the same. You have these mysteries you want to solve. How did this happen? And so, you know, you read and you study more and you finally figure it out.
Yeah. And you know, I've often thought this, and I don't want to make this a political conversation at all because the book is wonderful and it could go awry if we do that political chat. But with that said, I think sometimes that our elected officials aren't held to the same standards as every other professional. Like a doctor has to pass a test, right? So I think everybody who runs for office, especially federal office, has to understand the Constitution. There should be some kind of a constitutional test.
Yes,
I don't know.
I think so.
Just a thought. You want to comment on that, Mrs. Cheney?
Okay, all right. As soon as we get talk show hosts signed up for it, because you actually are quite knowledgeable on this subject. But if you talk to lots of talk show hosts,
Yes.
if you talk to lots of people, they don't know about the Constitution.
No, you are absolutely right. But talk show hosts influence the public, but they're not voting on behalf of the public. That's why I thought that. Okay, we went political. I didn't mean to do that to you. All right, so when did you start the book? Was it like a decade ago? This is a huge book.
6 years. I've been thinking about it for much longer, but it took me about 5 years to write. It was a pleasure, though. I mean, it was just a labor of love. I really, really enjoyed it.
So what did you find out about James Madison that was a surprise to you?
Well, in a sense, my surprise was the same as yours. Just awe at all he had accomplished, and understanding better than I had ever before how difficult the tasks were that he took on, how he prepared for them. If you just think of the overall arc of his story, the father of the Constitution, the architect of the Bill of Rights, he wrote George Washington's inaugural speech, and that indicates how important he was at getting the government underway. He was Secretary of State. He was president. He was a wartime president. So, it's just a remarkable story, but when you begin to delve into it, as you do when you write a book, you understand that you can recite those things, but they were not easy. They were not the kinds of things you just woke up in the morning and did. They were the kinds of things that were enormously difficult and required great intellect and energy.
So do we have the Madison Memorial? We have the Jefferson Memorial, the Lincoln Memorial, the Washington Memorial. Do we have something for Madison in Washington, D.C.?
Well, some years ago, they built a new building for the Library of Congress and put his name on it. And that's fitting in a way. He was a very intellectual man. Besides being a first-rate politician, he was a man of books. But still, I do think that you've hit a point that's kind of symptomatic that we have not given him the recognition that I think he deserves. And it may be because he was such a good man. I've sometimes thought that. He wasn't a person whose character you can get all excited about. He didn't have affairs with slaves as Jefferson did with one slave in any case.
Yeah.
He didn't get in the kind of scandals that Hamilton did. When I studied literature, we used to always ask ourselves, why, when you read a great epic like Milton's Paradise Lost, why is the devil more interesting than God? And so maybe it's just that we're interested in the bad boys.
Yeah, I think so.
And one of the wonderful things that you have done with this book is that you have depicted James Madison as a behind-the-scenes player before he really emerged into the public eye, because he always seemed to do something for the good of the people and the good of the country. It was not all about him.
Oh, that's a very wise observation. I sometimes think that, he was one of the first to understand that the important thing is to get something done, something good done, and not to worry about who gets the credit for it.
The book includes some pictures, and I'm going to talk about some of the superficial observations that I've made because I do make these things. Dolly Madison was attractive. She was
gorgeous.
He was a good-looking young man, but not a good-looking old man. She stayed attractive as she got older. And what was the story behind her being the first lady before she wasn't married? Who was she first lady with? Was it Jefferson?
Jefferson.
Oh, well, Jefferson was widowed by the time he became president. And so whenever he would invite men and women over, invite husbands and wives over, he would ask Dolly to serve as his hostess. So she did get some practice there, but she was kind of, a natural at making people feel warm and welcome, and I can see why he would have turned to her. I think the instant you met her, you felt like a better person than you were before. She just had a way about her that turned out to be a great political asset for Madison.
So we need to remember that as well. So if you were in an elevator and you were holding your book and there was a young person next to you saying, oh, "Who's that? What do I need to know about him?" What does every American need to know about James Madison?
Well, that he did more than anyone else to create the country we live in. It's almost as though we're fish swimming in a pond that he created. He established the kind of government we live under. He rules our civic life, so to speak. And I think understanding how all of that came about helps us to appreciate better how fortunate we are to live in this country. I think it also helps us appreciate better that living in a republic, living in a country where people are free, isn't always easy. That the government will do things that you don't like, and you'll be convinced the country's going in the wrong direction. And when you are, what Madison's example proves is you shouldn't just sit back and take it. You should stand up and fight for what you think is right. He founded the first political party, the first opposition party, because he thought that Alexander Hamilton was taking the country in entirely the wrong direction.
Wow.
So there's a lot that we need to know about Madison.
There really is, and that's probably the most important reason, that right there, to pick up the book. It's our way of getting to know not only a stoic. Sometimes we look at the history and we look at the oil portraits, like the beautiful portrait on the cover of the book, by the way, and we look at that and, wow, who is that guy? He doesn't look like a human being. He looks like this stoic person, but you've got a personality that you've included in the book. We understand a little bit about what made him tick, just simply because we're human too.
That portrait is pretty interesting because it was painted by Gilbert Stuart, who of course is a very famous painter, but he was always trying to make his way by painting famous people. Just a second, please.
Sure.
He was always trying to make his way. Just a second.
Okay. I wonder what's happening.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
By painting famous people, and he tried. I've got a dog here.
I thought it was a dog. I was going to say there's got to be a dog bothering her.
Oh, he can be on the air.
You want to take him outside? We'll wait. Does he need to go out?
Well, on live radio too.
Yeah.
Really sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
What kind of dog is he?
Yeah.
He's a big yellow lab named Nelson.
Oh.
After Lord Nelson.
Oh.
Does Yellow need to
cute.
go? Nelson, does Nelson need to go out?
Nelson is now taken care of.
Oh, okay.
Oh. I wish I had that. I don't have that. That's a luxury. What'd you do? Snap your fingers and somebody came by? Hey, get Nelson. Come on. Get Nelson.
You pull the phone to the door and you open the door and you push it out.
It is such an honor, Lynne, and Mrs. Cheney. I feel so bad calling you Lynne. It just doesn't seem right. You have made a contribution too, Lynne, to all of us. And so the book is James Madison. I know our listeners are dying to say hello. Are you okay with taking calls from listeners?
Sure.
Okay. All right.
As long as you put up with my dog.
I'm fine with the dog.
Nelson sounds wonderful.
And let's go to the phone. And we don't want no political chat. We don't want to do that. We want to talk about James Madison and maybe Nelson. Good morning. You're on the air.
Good morning. This is really a privilege. And James Madison was one of the most fascinating characters in our history. And one of my favorite stories is when the British Army approached Washington in 1814. Madison armed himself, rode out to the battlefield, and was almost captured when the American militia ran away from the British regulars. And I was hoping that Mrs. Cheney could talk about that briefly. And thank you so much for letting me on the air.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. You see, talk show hosts might not be educated, but talk show listeners are. See?
Yes.
No, you're a great talk show host, and that's a great question. Lincoln was the only other president to expose himself to enemy fire. And that's Admiral admirable in one sense. In another, it seems a little bit foolhardy. What would happen, if they were killed? But nevertheless, that is what Madison did. And the War of 1812, that was 1814 by then, was not going well. But in the end, we had a couple of remarkable victories at Baltimore and in New Orleans that made the country feel very good about itself, and I think made the rest of the world appreciate that we were indeed an independent nation.
One of the most wonderful things you are doing with all of your writings, Mrs. Cheney, is that you have written the wonderful books for children and young readers, and now you're doing a lateral move to write a book for adults to get everybody excited in history and to care more for our country.
It is just interesting. It's the founding period in particular. It's just this wonderfully romantic and dynamic a time that it's just interesting to read about. It's good for us, but it's more than medicine. It's a real pleasure to see these people doing brave, unexpected, heroic things, and to understand that they were human beings like us. The times were so different, and that's part of what makes history fascinating. But I had the good fortune, right after this book was finished, to sit on the porch at Mount Vernon, Washington's home, and watch the moon come up. And, remember that Madison had sat there with Washington, and maybe they had seen a full moon as I did that night. So that, you reach back so far in time, but in the end, there's a humanity that connects us all. And the freedom and the personal rights for which these men risked so much are great privileges for us today, and make our lives richer than most people in the world will ever know.
And knowing about them and knowing their contributions is our way of preserving their dream. And if we don't have writers like yourself educating us, doing the research and laying it all out in easy form, we don't know. And the fact that you've written for children as well just says so much, because that's the generation that will eventually be taking over, as always. I mean, that's nothing new. Mm-hmm. By the way, in your household on Halloween, who gave out the candy, you or your husband?
Well, Dick helps.
He helps because in the way I look at you and your husband is the way I look at my mother and father. My father would have scared everybody when he came to the door. If Dick Cheney came to the door when I went trick-or-treating, I would have said, well, can I get Mrs. Cheney, please?
Yes.
I think that would have been my thing. Are you concerned about the number? Because right now your book is number 2. I went to Amazon. Your book is number 2 right now. When did this come out?
In May. But it was number 1 for a long time. I think number 2 is it fell to number 2 when there was a very inexpensive Kindle book offered. This is sort of understanding how Amazon works is important for your readers.
Oh, okay. But I want you to know how powerful our show is. It'll go to number 1 by the time you're done with the interview.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's been on the bestseller list at the New York Times now for 4 weeks, so that's very gratifying.
Wow, that is good. It's an audio book also. Is that you on the audio? Is it your voice?
No, I wish I had read it now, but the woman who did it, I was very busy and just couldn't. But the woman who did it did a very good job.
And I just have to let everybody know that Mrs. Cheney is an alumni from the University of Wisconsin. So go Badgers and go Packers.
Oh, really? That's Robin. That's where Robin went to school. I think she saw something on the desk. It was carved in there.
It was a very interesting experience because I was there during the years of the anti-Vietnam War demonstrations, and it was a time. We worry now about our nation and I don't know, the ill feelings between people, but I don't think I've ever experienced a time in which we were as torn apart as we were during those years.
What kind of things did you discover that were not true? My notes indicate that there might be some myths that you refute in the book. What are they? Can you give us a couple of them? or at least one?
Well, the whole idea that Madison was shy, that it would pain him to see people, that's a totally 20th century invention. His contemporaries understood that he was reserved, which is a very different thing. But reserved is something you decide to be. Shy is something that you can't help being. And he used his reserve in very effective ways politically. The other is that he was sickly, and in fact, he was sick from time to time. But he was very energetic and well between the times he was sick. And I did a lot of work on that. Madison said toward the end of his presidency that he suffered during his life from sudden attacks somewhat resembling epilepsy. And so I began to look into those attacks. No other historian had really taken this issue with the kind of seriousness I decided it deserved. And indeed, he probably did suffer from a mild form of epilepsy. He learned to recognize when he was about to have a seizure so that, it didn't happen in public. But it did happen to him at crucial moments in his political career.
Oh, wow. I have a copy of this book. I hate to give it away, but that's what I like to do. So if I have a listener who wants the copy that was sent to me, it's a hardcover, beautiful book. Let's see, Amazon says it has, 600 pages? How many pages in this thing? It's huge. I guess I can just open the book.
A lot of it is footnotes, just so you know what I'm saying is true.
Oh my goodness! All right, let me take a call and give this one away. The rest of us will have to go buy it, put it to number one again. Good morning. You've got the book. Who's this?
This is Pete. I'm delighted. Thank you.
Pete, you got it. It'll be waiting for you. Thank you. Mrs. Cheney, it's an honor. I hope I haven't been disrespectfully silly. I just have enjoyed being on the air with you, and Robin and I were both, what do you call it again?
Starstruck.
Starstruck, yeah, when we knew you were coming on, so.
Well, no, James Madison liked a good joke. That's another thing that readers of the book will find. So,
oh, really?
I appreciate the humor.
So and real quickly, there was a son in there with the last name Todd. Is he related to Mary Todd, the wife of Lincoln?
I don't think so.
Okay.
He was Dolly's son, Madison's stepson.
But it said he was a handsome drunk.
He was. That's a pretty good description.
A handsome drunk.
And he spent all the money, So the founders, that's something people don't know. Jefferson ended up in poverty. Monroe did. Madison was a little better, but they all ended up having to sell their homes, and Dolly had to sell Montpelier. Virginia's economy had gone south, but in Madison's case, the drunken son, the handsome drunkard, had spent so much money that made his situation worse.
Wow. Well, thank you again. It's an honor, and thank you so much for taking some time out to speak to us today. And you're always welcome back. If you're ever in Central Florida, we have a beautiful studio here.
Yes, we do.
Thanks, and I'll bring my dog Nelson.
Oh, good.
Yeah, bring
good.
Nelson,
we
and
love Nelson.
we love dogs.
Yes,
we're
we
a
do.
dog-friendly radio station.
Yes, we are.
That's great. Nice to talk to you.
Thank you, Mrs. Cheney. Wow, that was awesome. All right,
Yes.
we'll be right back.
Bye.
Broadcasting from the Paddock Mall Studios, this is WOCA, Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
The weather is brought to you by myfwc.com. Life jackets save